Well, hello everyone, and welcome to this live recording of the EdTech Podcast and this particular episode of the VocTech Podcast in collaboration with Ufi VocTech Trust and as part of the Ufi Week of VocTech. My name is Sophie Bailey and I'm the founder and host of the EdTech Podcast and Work Trip. And in this particular recording, we're going to be looking at supporting hidden learner communities through human-centered design. A few thank yous before we start. So thank you, obviously, to all of our guests who we'll meet in a moment. Thank you to UFI for hosting this as part of their Week of VocTech. And thank you to you if you're listening live today or back on demand, either on the podcast feed or on the UFI YouTube channel. If you are watching this on the UFI YouTube channel and you post comments under the streaming of this recording, then those comments will pull through into StreamYard and we can use those comments or questions today. So do feel free to do that and we'll integrate those into the discussion. So that brings me on to our podcast theme. So as mentioned, it's looking at supporting hidden learner communities through human-centered design. So quite often those so-called hidden learner communities aren't small, they're quite sizable. We're going to find out about that today. But they're not particularly well served by the existing solution for learners in those spaces. So what are people doing about that? In this episode, we're going to chat to a business on a mission to provide better opportunities to apprentices through technology and coaching, a business that maps talented gamer skills traits to learner and employment pathways, and an online community working to connect 11 million unpaid carers to peer-to-peer learning. So let's get into it. I've had some fabulous preparatory chats with many of the guests today, and I'm really thrilled to bring all those discussions to the table at this podcast recording. So I'd like to welcome up to the virtual stage, as it were, Chichi Eruchalu, the Head of Leadership Development at Multiverse. Welcome, Chichi.
Good morning, Sophie. How are you?
And I'm very well. How are you doing, Chichi?
Very good, thanks.
Excellent. And for anyone who's watching in, Chichi is standing in for Elizabeth, who unfortunately was unwell today. David Barrie, founder of Game Academy. So welcome, David.
Hi, nice to see you.
Nice to see you. And finally, James Townsend, the founder of Mobilise. So welcome, James.
Hi, Sophie. Great to be with you all.
Great to be with you all. So first up, James, let's go back round in reverse. Please, could you each give an introduction to who you are and what you do in your own words? So a couple of minutes each, and then we'll kick into the questions today as well.
Sure. Thanks, Sophie. Well, so my name's James. I'm CEO and co-founder of Mobilise. But I guess my more important role is as son to my mum. And my mum happens to have MS. And that means that, like 11 million other people in the UK, I have what's called an unpaid carer role. I'm looking after a family member, friend, or neighbour. And we found that unpaid carers are so often hidden, as you say, Sophie, and we think there's a lot more that we could do to be supporting them in that role. And the key learning journey is, if you imagine your family comes across a diagnosis or an accident, or frankly, just as somebody moves towards old age, there's a very steep learning curve around maybe three areas. One is the practical things that you need to do to be caring for somebody. The second is how to navigate the system and the social care system, integrating with health, professionals coming into your house every now and again. It can be incredibly complicated. And then thirdly, there's a range of emotional challenges that you need to learn to navigate and how to bring your family on this journey as you go. So we think that there's an opportunity to support carers in doing that. And we've been working with 25 local authorities to date to reach about 350,000 people with the kind of support I've described.
Absolutely brilliant. And I know that everyone listening will have a connect into, that world, won't they? So through their own lived experience. That's brilliant. Thank you very much. David, let's go around to you.
So nice to meet you, and thanks for inviting me. So I'm David. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Game Academy. We're a personal service for players of video games. video game players are immensely talented and skilled. They're great at problem solving, collaboration, and communication. But very often they don't necessarily know the power of that skill, the in-game power out of game. And so we help them realize that through a whole series of different experiences, diagnostics, online experiences, inspirational talks, all sorts of curated programs, boot camps, all sorts of things to help game players really understand and capture the power of that talent. And then what we do is we have a talent pool of game players who we support in their personal development and career development. It's game playing is no longer a niche. Game playing is no longer, the sort of closet kind of bedroom experience. Obviously, the world of work is changing dramatically and coming towards game players. So the challenge and the opportunity is to almost, traditional recruitment and employability and career organizations don't necessarily recognize the power of game skills. And so what we're doing is bringing those skills forward and bringing a new force and a new thought about talent into the labor market.
Fantastic. Thank you. And finally, Chichi.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me. So I'm Chichi. I'm head of leadership development at Multiverse. And at Multiverse, we're creating an outstanding alternative to university and corporate training through professional apprenticeships. So I joined about almost 4 years ago when we were about 53 people, now over 800 in the UK and the US, supporting 8,000 apprentices across different companies. And so we're really committed to kind of closing that gap between understanding that there's talent everywhere, but opportunity isn't everywhere. And how can we provide alternative routes for individuals to get these roles and these positions? We have a really strong community where we have mentoring, events and sort of guest speakers who come and support our apprentices. So it's more than just a qualification. It's really about a community where you can learn and grow and really look to strengthen your sort of career growth and journey, but also learn additional skills. So, you go to university, you get a qualification. At Multiverse, you go to a qualification, but you're also learning those softer skills, those durable skills that are needed in the workplace to help you succeed. So really pleased to be having this conversation today.
Brilliant. Thank you all so much. It's a really great way to start the conversation. So I've got my first question here. We've covered over that somewhat, but if you want to get into any more detail, is really thinking about the sort of hidden aspect of the learner community. So, what is hidden about the learners that you serve? Is it about age? Is it about socioeconomic background, neurodiversity, or, thinking about whether their motivations for learning are kind of represented in what's out there currently when people, think about learning in the mainstream, I suppose. So anyone like to dig into, what seems to be hidden and why that should not be the case and why it should, we should do more to kind of serve those learners. So anyone like to jump in? James, I'm going to pick on you.
You kick off. James.
No, David, you get going first, please.
Well, I mean, the people who we serve, who are game players, they're in an immersive universe, they're in an immersive space. They're also in a space which culturally, over the last 30 years, I mean, obviously gameplay has grown massively, but there's a real anxiety around what the validity is of that talent. And also a real anxiety about sharing it. There's a real sense and concern that the conventional labor market is full of kind of fuddy-duddies who just don't get it, who don't have a kind of neo-goth World of Warcraft fantasy rolling through their head in any shape or form. God help them. We deal with a community who can be super cool and completely, utterly brilliant in what they do, but just sit on it and are anxious about expressing it to anyone else who's not a game player. There's also, there's a concentration of people with neurodiverse conditions, there's a sense, but then, game players generally are digital first, digital friendly, but that's hidden. It's there in the game, it's there for their mates, it's there for the people who you might love and nurture and bring forward in a game like League of Legends, but it just doesn't really, it's hard to manifest it out of game.
Thank you. Yeah, we'd love to get into how you surface that in the next question with diagnostics and that kind of thing. But does anyone sort of feel that how David expressed that hidden nature that relates to what they do, that actually there's this brilliance, but it's not, perhaps recognized?
I'm really interested in what David says about gamers sitting on it. So there's all sorts of challenges about carers being hidden. Typically, your carer is going to be between 45 and 65, and probably in work, and may well have parenting responsibilities in addition to their caring role, which is, I think, quite a long way from what we imagine unpaid carers to be, just kind of based on stereotypes. But I think what's really interesting about David describing gamers sitting on their skills, we don't often, or we haven't yet normalized the idea of talking about caring roles conventionally. Now, sometimes there are some pretty good reasons for that. If you're talking about the impact of a caring role on your sex life or incontinence around the home, that's probably not something that either you or the person you're caring for want to be chatting to your neighbor with, or somebody at Tesco's. But that does mean that we're not talking about some of the fantastic skills that people are developing, and the capacity and their personal development as they grow into a caring role, which can be a huge responsibility. I just sort of final thought on this, Sophie, would be around the nature of hidden caring. It's often hidden from yourself as a carer as well. You're so interested in the welfare of the person you're caring for, you haven't appreciated the impact that that's having on your life. Nobody gets out of bed and says, oh, you know what, I feel like identifying as an unpaid carer according to the definition of the 2014 Care Act. That's not a thing. But there's lots that we can do to encourage people to step back and just think about what's the impact that that's having on their life, and whether they would like some support to learn how to manage that in a way that can sink in with their priorities and what they want to achieve in life as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So that sort of dual role. So caring being an aspect of what you do, but there's this whole other aspect as well, not losing that, I suppose. And Chichi, what do you think?
Yeah, no, I really echo a lot of things that both David and James have said. And when we think about apprenticeships and apprentices, of the apprentices that we place, 52% of them are women. A third of them, 23% Asian, 21% Black. And we think about sort of neurodiversity as well. We've got a third of them, who say, acknowledge that, they're disabled or have additional learning needs. And we recognize that as we design our content, we support them through their journey. And also, if you have conversations with apprentices, they'll often tell you, this apprenticeship has changed my life. It's given me empowerment. It's helped me to learn life skills. It's helped me to, get a home and, get myself, on that path of life sort of thing. And that's been really, really impactful. And when we look at how we support individuals and look at apprenticeships and the impact that they have in organizations as well, traditionally, when you talk about apprenticeships, people think, oh, it's construction, it's those sort of more traditional roles. But there's been such a growth in companies seeing the value of apprenticeships and hiring individuals who have so much resilience, so much grit, highly intelligent, but they're just chosen to take a different path and actually seeing that impact in their organizations as well. So yeah, they are a group of people, I call them like a hidden army. They will change the world because they're coming in with fresh ideas and a different perspective to life, and then bringing that into the workplace as well, which is really powerful.
Fantastic. I mean, a lot of what you said in the first question, the answers to the first question, I think all of you related some part of, how this is all about supporting and building that community and sort of, I think, David, with your with Game Academy, that's actually, it's already there. It's just that there's perhaps this anxiety of exposing that to the outside world, because there's a kind of a shared understanding internally, but perhaps not externally. But if I understood correctly, so there was an element of, I don't know if there's an element of in-person and virtual. So you mentioned boot camps, whether they're digital. But anyway, the point being, what I'd love to know is, we know how important it is to build confidence and peer support for learners to reach their true potential and keep going. So there's that aspect, and Chichi, your role previously in the coaching capacity, so really bolstering that confidence and the fact that that learner does have the right to be there, to learn, to grow, to kind of bring what they have to offer to the world. So what I'd love to share with our learners is, with our listeners even, is how is this factored into your various offers? So how do you weave in not just the technology, but recognizing that confidence and peer-to-peer aspect's really important to the success ultimately of your learners?
Yeah, I mean, so at Multiverse, all of our apprentices have a coach who works with them throughout the duration of the program. And as a coach, that was the very first role that I did when I joined. You really get to know the individual. You get to understand, their motivations for doing an apprenticeship, why they've chosen to do a particular one that they've done, their family background, maybe some of the barriers that have presented themselves in their lives. And my role at the time as a coach was to support them through this journey for the next 12 to 18 months with their learning, but also navigating the world of work, particularly when it's their very first job. Some apprentices, like I said, had challenges. So you're kind of signposting and helping with that. And you wore many hats. Sometimes, you're a coach, you're a mentor. Sometimes it's like, I'm trying to find somewhere to live. I need to, what do I do? How do I, manage my finances with this thing and everything else like that? That first month where everybody's waiting for their first paycheck and they've gone out and like spent loads of money because they think, oh, I've got a job and I'm being paid. It's like, yes, let's slow down. So there's that as well. We've also got our mentoring scheme as well. So all of our apprentices, have options to join that. So over 600 apprentices have gone through that mentoring program, and that our mentors are people from all over, not just within Multiverse. So we open that up to other people to be part of that and really share their expertise. And our wide community offering was something that Ofsted cited as, exceptional as part of their outstanding rating, in that we've really thought about the different groups of people, whether it's socioeconomic background or kind of where you're from in the world, your culture, all those different things, and creating those different groups and subgroups within our community to support that. And then finally, we have apprentices who, we think about, and when we look at the data, we know that those apprentices who have gone on to achieve merits and distinctions, they're the ones who were active in the community. They're the ones who were connecting with their peers. They were doing like peer sessions, they were going to events, they were doing all those sorts of things, and we've seen that direct correlation to their final overall grade, which has been really great to see. And so we know that works, and we know that's something that's a huge part of our kind of USP and offering for our apprenticeships.
That's really fascinating. And just before I move on to David and James, so how do you sort of scale that? Because obviously that the attention to detail there is amazing. So then is it sort of cohort based? How do you scale it?
Yeah, so I mean, with coaching, so we've got different programs that have different models. So either one-to-one coaching, which tends to be for sort of our career starters, and we've also got group coaching models as well. Everybody has access to a coach. And then in the community, the way that's scaled is that a lot of our content is, we run, live sessions, we record things, we've got a platform that they can go on and connect with each other. And also we leverage the community. So we allow them to also share their expertise and share their knowledge, which is really great for them in terms of building their confidence, helping them to, consolidate and solidify the things that they're learning, and helping them to reach and grow their network as well. So yeah, that's something that we constantly think about, and how can we leverage technology to kind of help some of those aspects so that we can really protect that coach aspect, which is a big part of what makes what we do really work well.
Fantastic. James, are you hearing anything that sort of resonates with your work as well?
Yeah, really interesting that the word coaching has come up so much. And our big thing is scale. With 11 million people, we want to make this as scalable as possible. So in addition to the direct coaching that we can provide, we're also looking at how we can introduce coaching techniques into some of the content that's available, so that carers at 2 o'clock in the morning, when they might be scrolling through a resource on whatever element of caring it is, can actually be encouraged to take a moment to step back and think about what it is that they're looking to get out of this, and how they can take control as well. In addition to coaching, though, there's a slightly more old-fashioned concept that we've done a lot of thinking around, which is transactional analysis. And so often in a health and care setting, when you're struggling with something, you end up with a person in a uniform with a qualification telling you what to do. And it can be very easily for us to slip into a parent-child relationship there. Now, the challenge with that is that with a parent-child relationship, you might be exchanging the information, but it can be very hard to receive it and actually act on the recommendation that's been given. What we found is much more effective is to hear from another carer who's been in the same position, and somebody say, well, hey, you know what? I totally hear you. I've been there myself, and hey, this might not work for you, but this is what I did, and this is what I learned from it. Because I think when you're in a really high stress situation, you're not necessarily looking for somebody with a uniform and a qualification. You're looking for someone who's been on their knees and they've got the poo out of the carpet. They've known what it's like to be up all night because somebody you're looking after needs to go to the loo, or whatever it might be. There's that sort of empathetic importance, which comes from a community and is so important.
Thank you, James. And David, what about with the gamers? What's the sense of role models or peer-to-peer? What do you see within Game Academy?
Well, for a post-punk like me, it's weird to use the following expression, but I'll share it. I've never shared it before.
Can't wait for this, Jem.
I'll apologise first, then say it. I think the reality is what I know, that we approach what we do, we think of things as like an empowerment circle. We're almost obsessed now with sort of self-help, mutual support, and to think about creating and thinking about empowerment spaces and places. So we encourage interaction between game players. We are geekier than geek. We are really into the detail and are completely happy to explain stuff in as deep a technical and as specific a way as game players love in reading manuals. We do everything. We have sheer enthusiasm, frankly, like massive amounts of enthusiasm in a non-cheesy variety. And then also, we have things like inspirational talks. So we will have, we always remind people, reflecting back on the earlier question, is that there is this sort of strangeness that in contemporary culture, Elon Musk, Mark Zuckerberg, Reid Hoffman, I could give you a kind of a World Cup full of international, highly skilled football players who play games to a very high quality and talk about it. But there is this sort of disconnect between the fact that it may be like in caring, that caring and the caring impulse is lionized in culture. But somehow or other, there's no trickle down link to it. And so we're constantly bringing to our group inspirational people, senior commanders of the British Army, very, very successful tech entrepreneurs, to talk about how they may not have necessarily excelled in school, but that they are highly accomplished in game, and that games were, in effect, the media for them to grow. I think the other point, finally, to make is that which is a kind of bleedingly obvious point, is that we go to where they are. Right. So, we do stuff online, we do stuff on Discord, we do stuff on Twitch, and we're just there. And we don't show off very much. I think that's also a point, is that, game players are really aware of the sort of tech industrial complex and capitalism and how capitalism can exploit them. And so we're very careful about and assiduous about being brutally, terribly honest and quite straight, and not be too sort of salesy.
Yeah, we were having this discussion yesterday, actually, and
there's an integrity there which is crucially important.
Yeah, so the choice of language and making sure it connects with your particular learner group and it isn't too consultancy speak is very important, I think. But yeah, that brings me on to, so we were talking a little bit there about that, perhaps that caution. So what I'd love to know is, what's the ultimate end game, if there is one, for all of your different organizations? So for example, if it's ultimately fulfilling employment, how do you go about creating those pathways from identifying that amazing ability of your learners, nurturing that and then connecting them with opportunities. And James, your situation might be slightly different, but we can come around to that. But Chichi, do you want to talk a little bit about the actual employment world and how you navigate connecting both, and at what point you do that as well?
Yeah, I mean, if we think about what our ultimate aim is, we recognize there's two things. In organizations right now, there's a diversity problem and a sort of a digital transformation challenge around digital skills. And I think the pandemic really heightened that, really seeing this need to have these skills. And one of our goals is really, as we think about our learners, where it's not just about this first apprenticeship, it's kind of, we talk about basics to the boardroom. We really want to think about how we really change the kind of the structure, the way companies are kind of organized, having much more diverse individuals in those places. So with our apprentices, as they come through the program, it doesn't just end when they finish their apprenticeship. We support them as alumni and think about, okay, you've got your next role now. How do we best continue to help them guide you through that? A lot of our apprentices have come back for more and come back and done a second and some even have done a third apprenticeship. We now do degree apprenticeships. Wow. So that's just incredible to see that they enjoyed it the first time and they've come back to do it again. And so when we're looking at what success looks like for us, it's, has this individual completed their apprenticeship? Yes. Did they, stay in their role, or have they going to move into a promoted role or a new role? Yes. How have they been able to apply the skills that they've got, and what impact has that had in the organization? And we track that, and we work with the companies that we work with to really measure that return on investment, because I think it's really important just to see that and know that it's working, quote unquote. So other things that are important to know as well is that, it doesn't just stop with, one program. We work closely with our clients to understand what is the market saying right now about what's needed in terms of roles. If you think about data, for example, and software engineering, there's so many roles out there that are unfilled right now. And so we've worked to think about, okay, how can we create an apprenticeship program that takes somebody, for example, who has zero software engineering skills to becoming a software developer? Because even if you, I think they were saying there's so many open roles right now that even if you took all the graduates who've done an engineering qualification, you would still have vacancies. So it's really thinking about that. When you look at, how many women are in tech roles, the numbers are so low, and how can we support that in bringing more diversity into tech and opening those opportunities? And so we work really closely with our clients to really help them place people into those roles, or if they already have existing employees, upskilling them to be able to do that really, really well.
Yeah, I mean, and it appears that Multiverse has done a very good job of repositioning apprenticeships. As you mentioned, there was perhaps a perception previously of what that was, and you've done a great job of challenging that. And I wonder now as well whether it's an easier sell-in to employers, whether they tend to be a little bit more flexible on what perhaps previously was their entry requirements, and actually now not just kind of falling back on degree grades and that kind of thing. There seems to be a little bit more flexibility on the employer side as well.
Yeah, and it starts with, a lot of the work was education piece around apprenticeships, what they are and the value of them, and also kind of showing to employees that we know that when apprentices join an organization, they stay longer. They have a lot more loyalty to the organization that they stay in. So if you're thinking, okay, I've invested all this time and money into an individual and they're going to leave after a year, or, jump to the next thing. But if I hire an apprentice, they're most likely to stay, 2 to 3 years, if not longer. There's also that to consider as well. And, having those conversations around, like, we see the challenges that you're facing, you want to upskill your workforce. They're struggling with, data skills. I mean, data literacy came about as a program because, you look around, everybody works with data, but the level of literacy around how we use data and understanding how to even just basic Excel is such a huge gap. And so working with employers to say, look, we can help you with that. And at the same time, your the employees are being upskilled. They're learning these new skills, but this will also in turn support you and where you're going with that. So it's a continuous conversation. And yes, I think particularly when we moved and launched in the US, our very first client was Google, which was a big testament to show how much the face of, apprenticeships are changing, and the stamp of approval that they believe that, yes, we're the right provider and an organization to partner with to help do that there as well. So yeah, it's an ongoing conversation, but one, the tide is definitely turning.
That's great to hear. And David, we had a conversation previously, and I was really fascinated about, what you said around sort of mapping those different skills of gamers, and then what their current day-to-day job is, and trying to expose them to a world of different applicable job roles. And you mentioned diagnostics earlier, so perhaps you could explain to our listener like what the process is with Game Academy and what the opportunities are for connecting them to different opportunities as well.
So there's drilling, by the way, in my house or in a neighbouring building. So if it feels like someone's trying to get out of the digital room, I might have to shout, but just cut me off if it gets too bad.
We can't hear it, so the suffering is yours.
So what we've done basically is we've looked, every millimeter that you move in a game is recorded, and it's recorded quite often in your game profile. And you also, increasingly, people use platforms like Steam, which is in effect like a Netflix for games. And whatever you do gets burnt into your user profile. And what we've done is, using quite sophisticated data science, is found a way to create algorithms which basically can read and tease out of that gaming profile certain skills. So you find, for instance, and we find correlations between, for instance, people who play particular kinds of games and careers in IT, or people who play particular games and careers in the creative industries. And so we can show tendencies through principally choices of games and combinations of choices of games, is we can show tendencies towards particular careers. And what we've done, in answer to your question as well, is that we sort of snuck our way into, by stealth and a certain amount of sort of startup grind, is kind of ground our way into the supply chain. And so what we do is we provide these analytics to career organizations, employability organizations, local authorities, social enterprises, people who work, I have to say at the minute, principally with 18, 19, 20-year-olds, people who are in a really massively important transition in their life. And so what we do is we provide them with opportunity to use our analytics, and for us to bring kind of content programs for them to offer to the people who they work with. And that's where we are at the minute. In the future, we do want to obviously be wherever gamers are, which inevitably are things like the metaverse, in games themselves, but we've started sneaking our way into the supply chain as a source of talent. Finally, also, is that we, in the world in Chichi's world, is that, for instance, training organizations say, we're offering courses in cybersecurity, we're offering courses in digital marketing, blah, blah, blah. We would like talent. Can you please go and find people for us? And so we do collect up pools of people who are prospectively unbelievably hot in cybersecurity or marketing, or have gone off and streamed and are brilliant at actually producing stuff and potentially have a career in the creative industries.
Fantastic, thank you. You did admirably with the drilling as well, so commendations on that. And James, I don't know, with Mobilise, whether that's slightly different, because people aren't, I'm guessing, aren't looking for a different job role. They're looking for the support and the learning in that unpaid role instead. So can you kind of relate to the question in a different way?
Absolutely, Sophie. I mean, this is a question that we're constantly asking. And actually, we boil it down to an overarching question, which is it is quite unfashionable to ask it, but what is a good life? And actually, caring for a family member is an absolutely standard part of family life. It's equitable to parenting in some ways. And aside from all of the jokes, people find parenting uplifting. It's a sort of central part of who they are. So we're looking at how we can acknowledge the expertise, the wisdom, and the knowledge that you're picking up in a caring role, and reflect that back to the carer and say, hey, this is great. You're doing really, really well. And I think it's important that carers will almost always say, I want to do this myself. I want to be the person caring here because I love this person and I want to make sure they're okay. But Sophie, there is a very practical element to your question, which is that a huge number of people are currently dropping out of the workforce because they're juggling and struggling to cope with caring responsibilities and work. I mentioned earlier that so many carers are between 45 and 65. So not only do we want to help carers stay and work, which is very often what they want to do, we also want to help businesses who have really amazing talent at the top of their game between 45 and 65 who are really valuable to their organization. They want to be making whatever intervention they can to make sure those people are supported with their caring responsibilities so that they can stay in work as well. So there's a lot that we can do to make sure that caring is never going to be easy, but can we iron out some of the unnecessary frustrations, particularly around access to information and communication and learning, that would make that process much more straightforward.
So that's really interesting to me, and I can imagine that the policymakers and the politicians challenged by UK PLC productivity at the moment are also very interested in that. And I'm guessing a lot of that comes down to efficiencies around how long does it take me to find the right information? Can I do that in a better way? Can I do that continuously and that kind of thing?
Absolutely. Yeah. And so much of caring at the moment, you have to learn through your own mistakes, which, although a valuable exercise, can be really inefficient. If there's 11 million of us, why not learn from each other's mistakes and build on them as we go? We can't necessarily give the right answer first up, but that will be a much more straightforward process for everybody.
Fantastic, thank you. So we've got 7 minutes left, so I'm going to go rapid fire, try and get as much in as we can, and we've got some great questions dropped in the chat here. So first one, Metaverse have done a great job in promoting apprenticeships as exciting and appealing. Is Chichi seeing a wider shift in perception from policymakers? So we talked about that shift in employers. Are you seeing an equivalent change in appetite from policymakers? Oh, and your mute's on.
Sorry. Yeah, I was saying it's actually interesting because apprenticeships have always been quite popular across the political spectrum, but we are seeing that perception change, and policymakers are kind of recognizing that they do hold the same prestige as, say, university degree and even the same rigor. So being able to award degrees, we can now do multiverse degrees, and so when you have a degree from university and a multiverse degree, they're both degrees, but the difference is, as an applied degree, you've had those 3 years learning on the job as well, so you've been given back and having that value back to the organization from day one. So yeah, we are seeing that and that perception shift as well.
And actually, I'd love to go back to that earlier point. So you mentioned using technology to help you scale your ambitions, and obviously those ambitions are pretty massive. So could you tell us a little bit about how you apply technology to achieve some of your goals as well?
Yeah, so if I think about the end-to-end process, right at the beginning, if you think about the application process, hundreds of thousands of people applying for apprenticeships. So traditionally, people will assess on grades, we assess on grit. We're looking at sort of how have the things that you've gone through and done in your life help to shape who you are, and how will that then influence how you continue to be. So we have built a platform which assesses that quite well. And one of the things that we're doing with that is looking to see and using data to understand, okay, what are the things that we can start to see in candidates that will show us that they will be successful in an apprenticeship. And that's one way we look to scale that with our technology, and then obviously using technology with our learning, with our community and the platform. So similar to what James was saying about giving people sort of that empowerment to get the information they need in real time. So yes, you've got your sessions and your coaching and all that sort of thing, but having resources and things that people can access when they need it is really, really key. But the big part of being Multiverse as the institution, so to speak, is really about kind of the front end and how we're managing our application process and bringing people in and being able to tell as an organization that yes, this is the kind of how we can assess a candidate and how we can demonstrate that this person will be successful on this particular program.
Fantastic, thank you. And David, one for you. What inspired David to explore the skills gained through games? So what was the inspiration behind this whole endeavour?
Well, two things really. The first is if you look at the world of work and you look at what the skills are which are valued, and then you look at the skills of game players, you see an immense connection between the two. We live in a world where people exist in a virtual world, they socialize in a virtual world. We've created all these apps to enable people to sort of belong and become something and achieve something within a virtual world. So it seems like a no-brainer no-brainer for us to see one and the other. The other thing as well is purely just experience of meeting people, frankly. I mean, when you meet, kind of as I've done, shed loads of plumbers who play Football Manager to an immensely high degree. And also you meet, I met shed loads of assistant managers of super grocery stores who walk towards the problem rather than walk away. So head office, messes up and sort of sends a ridiculous order from the warehouse to the store. Most people run for the emergency exits. They don't want to have anything to do with it. Oh, is that the time I need to go home? There is a slight tendency, if not a big tendency, of the game player to walk towards the problem. And for me, that is like beyond exciting and beyond inspiring. Because then you really see that there's a connection, which is and something which is kind of latent. So yeah, it's those two things. One is the sort of looking at the analysis and where the world's going, blah blah, and where we're going to find people. Where's the source of future digital skills? And the second is just the testament of just meeting the most remarkable people.
Brilliant. I love that. So we've got 3 minutes. I think it would be fabulous if you can all spend about a minute just if you'd like to share with our listeners one thing that really moves you or inspires your way of working with, whether it's Mobilise, Game Academy or Multiverse or your own kind of individual contributions, but anything you'd like to share. So is that a project, person, book, podcast, anything else that helps shape your way of thinking in this space? James, let's go to you first.
Oh, thank you. Well, hey, Sophie, I'm a teacher at heart. I trained as a maths teacher back in the day. And so I love hitting revenue targets and growth of the company. But the thing that really gets me going is seeing people thrive. And the number of instances that I can think of where somebody's come to us really stressed at kind of the last gasp, and they're just desperate to know what to do. And through just a few weeks of being on our platform, they've started to take a step back. They've got a bit of a sense of control over a situation. They know what they're aiming for, and they feel like they've shifted from managing or coping with the situation to actually starting to thrive. And I think for me personally, but I know also anybody who works for Mobilise, that is the thing that gets us out of bed every day, and it's a real privilege to see it on such a regular basis.
Yeah, and if I could have handed Mobilise an account of Mobilise to my mum a couple of years back, that would have been fabulous. So I'm sure everyone can totally connect into that. So thank you.
Thank you.
David, how about yourself? Oh, you're on mute. Don't worry, it must be a design flaw there, surely. We'll automate it in a year.
Well, I managed to sort of kill the drilling.
Yeah.
But I'm now not on mute. I mean, for me, it was frankly just one. In the end, actually, it's one conversation I had with a carer who is mad from the northeast, who's like 24, who's mad for Animal Crossing, a game called Animal Crossing, which is a gorgeous, amazing game. And it was when I found her. I don't know how I found her. Anyway, I found her, and then she was talking to me about how between James, you should probably put your fingers in your ears for this. Is that between supporting clients in her car, she would live stream Animal Crossing, and for me that was just brilliant. I mean, my deep background, I made television for like 20 years, directing programs and producing them all that. But the critical bit is also that, we gave her our analytics and said, okay, look, just do this, right? And then so she came back and she scored high for entrepreneurship. And we chatted about it afterwards. She said, I score high for entrepreneurship. I'm not an entrepreneur. The software is telling me I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not. And I said, well, what the hell? I didn't quite say it in as clean as fashion as that. I said, what the hell are you doing in between clients? You're streaming. You know, my background, I made films from when I was about like 10 years old, and I made lots and lots and lots and lots of films and then ended up making television, is that she is a creative entrepreneur. She's the basic creative entrepreneur. She's streaming, she's marketing, she's making videos, she's doing this thing. She's got an itch which she cannot help scratch. And that is, and I gave her, I didn't do it in such a kind of, patronizing way, but I sort of said, this, you are a creative entrepreneur. And we went through it, and she went, well, yeah. And she said, rather grudgingly, but she went, yeah, I guess I am. And that for me is the moment, and which makes it all worthwhile, and which actually just drives it all forward, is to be able to reveal to people their hidden talent, and to be able to reveal to them that there is a miracle in their life, and it's at the center of their life, and actually, it's what is their life. But they just don't necessarily have an opportunity to reflect upon it or see it in that way. So it's a different lens. And that's the way in which, obviously, if we're all mutually intent on social mobilization, on supporting people to express themselves and realize what they want to realize, is that it's these sorts of little interventions or particular lenses, which, giving people lenses to see their life in a different way, which, really is motivating.
Thank you, David. And finally, Chichi.
Yeah, I completely resonate with that, David. There's so many apprentice stories I could share with you. There's ones that come to mind of a guy who had a stammer, or has a stammer, but didn't use that as a kind of way to restrict or kind of limit what he's capable of achieving. He's gone and created a podcast, he's won awards, he's done a TED talk. There's another apprentice who was an apprentice even at Multiverse, again, has gone on to do great things as well. And just, they sharing their stories is so inspiring. And when I see apprentices that I even kind of worked with personally, doing an apprenticeship, doing another one, the background that they had, the challenges that they were facing, excuse me, whilst they were doing that, to successfully complete that, get a new job and do all of that is just so empowering. So for me, there's just so many things that make us getting up every day to do the work we do really, really exciting. We know we're changing lives. And the final example, 2 apprentices who sent a picture. In fact, they posted it on Instagram of like, if this is what apprenticeships can do, then everyone should do apprenticeships. And they were both stood in front of their houses that they had bought. Wow. So these are like 20-year-olds who have been apprenticeships, and they had been saving and doing everything, and then they bought properties. And so it was just lovely to see, and just to know that we've all been part of that journey. So the opportunities are endless for what we can do. So apprenticeships are fantastic.
Well, I have to say, after 7 years of doing the EdTech podcast, that's probably 3 organizations where I feel like, wow, what a huge difference vocational learning technology and entrepreneurship has made. So thank you all for sharing your stories. It's been really amazing and quite inspirational to listen into. So thank you so much. We're now at the end of time, so it's time to say goodbye. So thank you everyone for listening in. If you're watching live, then do go and check out the rest of the week of VocTech events that are happening this week. And if you're listening back, then I will be editing this. I mean, you won't hear this bit, so it's kind of irrelevant. But for anyone else listening in, I'll get this edited and turned around by the end of the week and out. And you'll hear this on the EdTech podcast feed next week. We have lots of lovely, generous comments. So thank you. What an amazing panel. And really love the brutal honesty. I love it. Integrity is important. So yeah, thank you again to all of our amazing guests, and see you next time. Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you.